If you're planning to retire sometime this year and start collecting Social Security before you've hit your full retirement age, there's a rule buried inside Social Security's system that trips up more people than almost anything else in the entire benefits process. And it works both for you and against you depending on whether you understand it before you file or find out about it the hard way afterward. It's officially called the Special Earnings Limit Rule, though most people just know it as the first year of retirement rule. And if you're someone who's already earned a solid chunk of income this year before deciding to retire, this single rule could be the difference between collecting every dollar of the benefit you're owed starting the month you file or watching Social Security quietly withhold portions of your check because of income you earned months before you ever filed a claim. Here's the problem this rule was actually built to solve. Social Security has what's called an earnings limit, a cap on how much you can earn from work while collecting benefits before your full retirement age without the government reducing what it pays you. For 2026, if you're under your full retirement age for the entire year, that limit sits at $24,480. Earn more than that, and Social Security withholds $1 in benefits for every $2 you earn above the limit. Under normal circumstances, this is calculated based on your total earnings for the entire calendar year, added up from January through December. And that's exactly where the confusion starts, because plenty of people don't retire on January 1st. They work for 6 months, 8 months, sometimes 10 months out of the year, earning a full salary the entire time, and then decide to retire and file for Social Security partway through. If Social Security simply applied the standard annual limit to someone like that, almost everyone retiring mid-year would show up already over the limit before they'd even collected their first check, purely because of income they earned while they were still working, months before they ever touched a Social Security payment. That's precisely the scenario the first-year rule exists to fix. Instead of looking at your entire year's earnings, Social Security switches, specifically for the calendar year in which you first start collecting benefits, from an annual test to a monthly one. Under this rule, it doesn't matter how much you earned in the months before you filed. What matters is simply this. For any individual month where your earnings fall under the monthly limit, Social Security considers you retired for that month and pays you your full benefit, completely independent of what you earned earlier in the year. The monthly limit itself is just the annual limit divided by 12, which for 2026 works out to $2,040 a month. So picture someone who worked a full-time job earning around $8,000 a month from January all the way through July, well past the annual limit for the year, and then retired and filed for Social Security starting in August. Under the standard annual rule, that person would already be deep over the limit before their first check ever arrived. But under the first-year rule, none of that January through July income matters at all for benefit purposes. As long as their earnings from August onward stay under $2,040 a month, they receive their full Social Security benefit for every one of those remaining months, regardless of how much they made earlier in the year. There's an important exception layered inside this rule that catches people off guard just as often as the rule itself does, and it applies specifically to the calendar year in which you reach your full retirement age. If you're turning your full retirement age sometime during the same year you retire, the earnings limit that applies to you jumps considerably higher, and the penalty for exceeding it gets more forgiving too. For 2026, if you'll reach full retirement age sometime during the year, the annual limit for the months leading up to your birthday sits at $65,160, with only $1 withheld for every $3 earned above that, a noticeably gentler ratio than the standard 2-to-1 penalty. Divide that by 12, and the monthly threshold under the first-year rule comes out to $5,430, well over double the limit that applies to someone who's further away from full retirement age.
And once you actually reach the month of your full retirement age itself, the earnings limit disappears entirely. From that point forward, you can earn any amount of income from work with zero impact on your Social Security benefit. No reduction, no monthly test, nothing to track at all.
There's one more layer to this that specifically affects anyone who's self-employed rather than drawing a regular paycheck, and it exists because Social Security recognizes that self-employed individuals have far more control over exactly when and how their income actually gets paid out to them than a typical employee does. If you own a business, you could theoretically time your invoices, defer payments, or structure your compensation in ways that make your reported monthly earnings look artificially low, even while you're still actively working substantial hours in that business. To close that loophole, Social Security adds a second condition for anyone self-employed claiming the first-year rule. It's not enough to simply stay under the monthly earnings limit. You also can't spend more than 45 hours a month actively working in your business if you want that month to count as retired. And there's a further wrinkle for people in what Social Security classifies as a highly skilled occupation. If that describes your line of work, the threshold for what counts as substantial work drops considerably, sometimes as low as 15 hours a month, meaning the hours test alone could disqualify a month even if your reported income stayed well under the dollar limit. So if you're self-employed and planning to use this rule during your first year of retirement, you genuinely need to track both numbers, your monthly income and your monthly hours, because either one crossing the line on its own is enough to affect that month's benefit. It's also worth being clear about exactly how long this special rule actually lasts, because it's easy to assume it just becomes your new permanent situation once it kicks in. It doesn't. The monthly earnings test under the first-year rule applies only for the remainder of the calendar year in which you first begin collecting benefits, and Social Security can only use this special monthly rule one single time during that one calendar year. Starting the following January, the system switches back to the standard annual earnings test for good, meaning from that point forward, any reduction to your benefits gets calculated based on your total earnings across the full year, not month by month. So if you retire partway through this year and take advantage of the monthly rule to protect the benefits tied to the months you're already retired, understand that come next January, you're back under the ordinary annual limit like everyone else, and any income you earn in future years needs to be planned with that annual threshold in mind, rather than assuming the monthly flexibility carries forward indefinitely. Here's what I'd actually do with all of this if you're anywhere close to retiring mid-year and starting Social Security before your full retirement age. First, figure out precisely which category you fall into, whether you'll be under full retirement age for the entire remainder of this year, or whether your birthday reaching full retirement age actually falls within this same calendar year, since that single distinction changes your monthly limit dramatically from $2,040 to $5,430. And it's worth knowing exactly which number applies to you before you file, rather than discovering it afterward. Second, once you've filed and started benefits, keep a simple month-by-month log of what you actually earn, rather than thinking in terms of your annual total, since the entire protection this rule offers depends on staying under the monthly threshold in each individual month you're collecting, not on your total for the year. Third, if you're self-employed, track your hours just as carefully as your income, and be honest with yourself about whether your particular line of work would be classified as highly skilled, since that determines whether your hours threshold sits at 45 a month or drops all the way down to 15. And fourth, mark your calendar
for January of next year, because that's the month this special monthly protection quietly ends, and the standard annual earnings test takes over for good, which means any planning you do around this rule needs a clear expiration date built into it from the start. Understanding this one distinction between the annual test most people assume applies and the monthly test that actually governs your very first year of benefits is exactly the kind of detail that determines whether retiring mid-year costs you money you didn't expect to lose, or whether it works out to your advantage precisely the way this rule was designed to let it.